Ariel Helwani in Toronto gearing up for UFC 140 alongside MMA manager Malki Kawa, who of course is here for his client Jon Jones. But there's some very big news involving... And Frank Mir. This guy's got a lot of clients, but there is some very big news involving another client of yours, Carlos Condit. We just found out a couple of minutes ago, Dana White tweeted that George St. Pierre is injured. Carlos Condit will now be fighting Nick Diaz for the interim welterweight title in February. How did this come about?
I was at dinner last night actually with John and one of his coaches, Brandon Gibson, and we were sitting there, we were just talking, and I got a phone call from Joe Silva pretty late. I didn't know what it was about. I just, figured he was calling me about a matchup like normal, something for, what I thought about something. And he says, are you around people? And I'm like, yeah, I am. He's like, who? I'm like, John. He's like, can you get up and walk away? I said, sure. So I walked outside, and I'm thinking, this is, what is this got to, possibly be about? And he ends up turning around, and he's like, your boy Carlos was fighting for the title. So I thought something happened with Nick. He's just not, something happened again, right? So I'm like, yes, all right, cool, awesome. So I was, all excited. He goes, but he's not fighting George. I said, okay. And he was like, George is hurt. So I said, maybe George retired. So I'm just waiting. And he says, it's going to be for an interim belt. Here's the whole thing, blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, can I tell anybody? And he was like, you can only tell the fighter. You can't tell anyone else. Don't tell anything. So, I tweeted, what I tweeted. And then I ended up calling Carlos, and he got emotional all over again. Right. As if he first, like when he first got the title shot, he started crying. So I call him again, and he's all like, oh my God, here we go again. He was all happy and stuff. So, it was an exciting moment, and it was real cool. So that's pretty much how it came about.
Now, for Carlos, obviously this is an easy decision. You move up. Do you have any idea what they will do with his original opponent, Josh Koscheck?
No, I really don't have any clue what they'll do with Josh. I'm figuring they'll put him in with someone that's right up there in the ladder because, with them saying he's out for 10 months, he's probably gone for 10 months and probably going to have to rehab. And then, when he puts in a full camp, come back, you might not see George for maybe a year. My guess, So if they fight in February, one of those two guys is going to win. One of them will be crowned champion. You're probably talking about 3-4 more months before they fight again. So I'm thinking Koscheck could be in line. The winner between Ellenberger, Sanchez could be in line. You got, Campman who's around. You just got a lot of different options that possibly could be. The cool thing about this is that you have very exciting fighters now that could possibly hold the belt between Nick and Carlos. They're both real exciting. And I think that the fights and the matchups that are out there, potentially after this fight, whoever wins, I think is just, there'll be some real blockbuster fights.
Are you trying to say that GSP is not an exciting fighter?
No, I'm not trying to say that. But what I'm saying is that, it's kind of funny because, I represent John and I want him to hold the belt forever, right? But it's like sometimes you just kind of want to see maybe, just something different for a championship fight. And I just think that Nick and Carlos bring something different than what we've been used to seeing. I think George is the most dominant, one of the most dominant champions. I love George. I think he's a phenomenal fighter. I don't go on that whole he's boring and stuff. He's attacked. It's art when you watch this guy fight. But for me, it's kind of also like different now. You might see a slugfest. You might see a 5-round more. You might see a first-round knockout. It's just things that we haven't seen in the welterweight championship fights in the last couple fights. So,
is there a chance that, let's say the winner of this fight, let's say it's Carlos Condit, he wins the interim title, that he will have to fight someone else before George can come back? Because we're saying 10 months, and let's say it takes 12 months. I mean, that's a long time for someone to wait, and that fight's 2 months away.
I think what's going to happen is that he's going to end up defending the belt. Whoever wins this belt is going to defend it at least once or twice before George comes back. And then when George comes back, it's to unify that belt. Whoever has that belt at that point should be the clear-cut #1 contender at welterweight.
You were very vocal when the UFC took his title shot away, Carlos's title shot away, and gave it to Nick Diaz. I hate to bring something up like this, but do you feel it's almost like it was meant to be? It was sort of, karma in a way that it came back and now it's landed back on Carlos?
I have this saying that good things, happen to good people. Carlos is a really good guy. And I think George is a great guy. So, is it karma? I don't know, but is it, yeah, I guess, yeah, answer is simple as... Did
that sort of cross your mind?
It was kind of like, when it first happened, you feel horrible, right? I'm sorry, when he first got the shot, you feel phenomenal. It's great because in reality, before Nick came over from Strikeforce, Carlos beats BJ Penn. He was getting the title shot anyway, right? He beats Dun Hyun Kim, who at that time was undefeated, and he beats him in a devastating fashion. And you know how the UFC operates. If someone's an exciting fighter and he's shooting up the ranks and he's winning and is on a good streak, all on timing, all on where he's at in the rankings, they will probably give him the title shot. So therefore, my philosophy on keeping fighters fighting is always around the time when champions are fighting. The number one contenders that I represent, I put them around the same time. It's what I try to do. So if one wins and my guy wins, well, there's no question, unless there's someone else out there that's just way, more deserving of it. So I didn't think there was anybody more deserving than Carlos Condit. I mean, he came in from the WEC as the champ and didn't get a shot for a belt right away, the way the other WC champions got coming over. So I thought that was, one shot there that he missed right off the bat. They didn't give it to him. Then he wins all these fights, and he's beating some good guys. Ellenberger, everybody except for Campman, I think, in a very close call. And a lot of people think that, maybe he won that fight. So then they give him this shot. I'm thinking, great, awesome, you know what I mean? And it wasn't because of anything bad. It's just other than Nick not showing up. So we got the title shot. I thought we deserved the title shot before anyone anyway. But I understand what they did, so, we get it. When they took it away, it was a really bad feeling. It was a real bad feeling. So now that it comes back, it's just, I don't know that it's more like, it's not like retribution or like, we laughing last at the end. It's just more like, well, we felt like this is what we deserve from the get-go. So we're kind of like, thank you, to them for allowing this to happen and making this a title shot, because they could have easily said he's out and, there's no interim belt, and they could do whatever they want to do, and they're making this an interim thing, and this is I think a big step in his career and for Nick too as well.
Since we have you here, it's so hard to get a couple minutes with you, so I just want to ask you a couple other questions about some of your other clients. You mentioned Jon Jones being here. This is his fourth fight in 2011. If he wins on Saturday night, probably one of the greatest years in UFC history. Do you think he will take a long vacation and not come back for a very long time after this fight?
Yes, absolutely yes.
So when do you think we will see him again if he wins on Saturday night?
I don't know.
They're going to call you up in 2 weeks and say.
They'll be like, listen, we need him to fight March something, whatever it is. And, but he deserves a break. I mean, the kid really, has answered the call every time. And, we're intending to take a vacation after this fight.
Is it your understanding that the winner of the Rashad Evans-Phil Davis fight would be the next man in line?
Honestly, Ariel, I don't really, when I representing Jon, I've never really went and asked who's the next guy in line. I just look at what everyone's writing and what they're saying, and from what I understand, if Phil beats Rashad, he may get the shot. If Rashad beats Phil, Rashad's the number one contender right now. Whatever Rashad does, it's all in his hands. So if Rashad wins, I think Rashad's the number one contender, and if that's a fight that happens in March, June, July, August, September, whenever, he's the number one contender. Will Rashad fight Phil and one gets hurt and then, Jon's ready to fight and Dan Henderson's available? It's likely to happen any which way. My order would be Rashad number one, Dan Henderson two, and then, everybody else however way you want to rank them. That's the way I would see this division kind of like shaking out, especially with Henderson's win over Shogun, a couple weeks ago. So that's my opinion of it. But again, Joe Silva and Dana, they do it the way they feel fans want to see and what we know.
What's at stake for Frank Mir on Saturday night? He already beat Nogueira. He's sort of in this sort of mid-tier pack in the top 10 at heavyweight. If he wins, what would you like them to do with him next?
I think what Frank would like to do, and you know me, guys like Frank, guys like Jon, guys like Ben Henderson, Carlos Condit, I'm not trying to put them in other fights that don't get them anywhere. I think the next fight for him after that is the winner of the Brock and Overeem fight. I mean, that's what we would push for.
They've already said the winner of that fight is the number one contender.
Listen, I get it, but you know how it goes.
Dos Santos is injured, so.
So that's my thing. It's all about timing one more time. So he fights now. They fight in 2-3 weeks. One of them wins. Dos Santos is not ready to come back for 6 months. Let's plug them in. You know what I mean? And if whether it's Overeem, whether it's Brock, that's exactly who I'd push for right away. So I don't know of any other heavyweight that's really out there for him to fight that makes sense as far as progressing towards that number one contender status and that title shot. So I think Frank wants it. That's what I would. That's what I'm advising to get done, and that's what we'll probably push for as soon as we find out who wins that fight January 1st. Forget who wins it. It doesn't matter. As soon as this fight's over, Frank wins this fight, we're pushing for, winner of that fight. We want to be number one contender and fight for that belt when Dos Santos is ready to come back.
Okay, final question. Another client of yours, we haven't heard from him in a couple of weeks. Chris Leben was suspended, and he made a brief statement. You made a brief statement, but we don't know exactly what his status is with the UFC. How is Chris doing, first and foremost, and will he be back in the UFC?
Yeah, Chris will be back in the UFC. Listen, it's a little bit of a sticky situation, you know what I mean? The poor, I'm not going to call him poor guy, but what I'm going to say is that he's dealing with some stuff. We're going to help him. The UFC is committed to helping him. I'm going to talk to Dana this weekend when I see him, and I'm going to have a long conversation with him about the plan with Chris going forward, because I think the main thing is to get Chris right, get him, together. He's got other issues, you know what I'm saying? I think what people read and saw isn't exactly him abusing stuff. He's got some injuries and some things that are really, bothering him. So I got to get those fixed. I got to get everything together. And then I think that after I talk to Dana, we can have a more definitive thing. And, we'll be making a statement on it once I really have a plan in place. But I'd like to see him back in the octagon within 6 months. And I want to do everything in my power to get everything together to make that happen.
Even though the suspension is for a year.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Dana suspended him for a year. It's not a commission or anything like that. So, I know Dana very well and the way he operates sometimes. And I think that if Chris does what he has to do to show Dana that this is not going to be a problem, it's not going to happen again, I think there might be a possibility to bring him back sooner. I mean, I'm going to lobby for it. But, again, there's got to be other steps that go for, I can't just call Dana and say, hey, do me a favor, and this, that, and the other. Chris has to go out and do what Chris has to do. And when Chris does that, and Chris shows that this is, something that's behind him and not going to happen again, and, maybe there's other things that maybe Dana didn't know, maybe there's, certain things that we think that once we talk to Dana that might be able to move this around or make this a little bit, less of a suspension maybe, possibly, then that might happen. I don't, I have faith in it, so we'll see.
Malki, thank you for the time. Congrats on the Condit Diaz fight.
Thank you.